Exodus chapter 12. We start to look tonight at the Passover. We probably will get finished with it. I'll try my best to get finished with chapter 12 tonight. It's a rather large chapter, but this Passover is not just an introduction of a tradition. There's a lot of meaning that goes along with what the Passover was. As you know, and as you're reading and studying in Genesis on Sunday night or Sunday morning for Sunday school and throughout the week in your Bible reading, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, their families, the Jewish people are in the land of Canaan right now, but they're just occupants there. They're not controlling the land. It's not their land yet. And as you know, if you don't, you will by the end of this week. You'll know that that all the people of Jacob will wind up going to Egypt to be able to get away from a famine or be able to get to food actually. And they're welcomed into Egypt by Joseph, and they live there for really hundreds of years, 430 years, I think is what it was. And we'll look at some of that tonight. But this starts the beginning of the religious calendar for the Jewish people. They didn't have that before. They have a calendar that they've been, but this is something that's specific to them. So they would have a civil calendar, and then they would also, this starts the beginning of their religious calendar. So God calls this the first month of their year, of their religious year. And the Passover is going to take place on the 15th day of the first month of the first year. So this is the beginning. How exciting would that be to be able to be part of somebody coming to you and saying, this is year one, this is day one, and this is month one. And from here on out, we're God's people. We'll always be God's people. And this is the beginning of it. You lived in a time to where you were here in the first day of where God consecrated this calendar and this time, and you, his people, would have been exciting to be part of that. And they also were part of something that was special that's about to take place about the Exodus. They're about to get on out of town after several plagues and several things that's happened, that Pharaoh has gone back and forth with not wanting to let them go, and then he's going to let them go, and then all of a sudden, after last week, I think Mark covered that last plague, but after that happened, and this is the tonight of what's going to happen tonight. Pharaoh lets the Israelites go. So let's look at this real quick, and some of it we'll just read through. I might stop and go through some of this and try to explain. There are going to be parallels, and I'll try to keep those as minimalized as I can so we can get through this. But there are tons of parallels between the Passover and Jesus Christ and the death of Christ. The main one being the blood of the Lamb. Now tonight, as God tells Moses, and Moses tells the people of Israel, he says, we're going to sacrifice a lamb. We're going to a sheep or goat, and then take that blood. You're going to take some hyssop. You're going to basically take a brush, and you're going to brush that blood all over your doorpost, on the doorpost and on the top. You're going to put blood all over that. Now, as we read through this, I want you to think how odd that sounds. How odd that sounds. To me, if I was that guy, that girl there, And this is, and I've just been told this is the beginning, and this is the first thing that we're going to do. We're going to have this sacrifice. We're going to take the blood of that sacrifice, and we're going to smear it all over you. You're going to smear it all over your house. That's what we're going to do, Patsy. We're going to mess that door up good. What would your immediate thought be? Is there not another way? You know, do we have to do this? So it's strange. They've never done this before. They've had sacrifices before. They've sacrificed to God, and they've built monuments or memorials, and they've always done that since they were people. But this is the first Passover. This is it, and they've never done this before. So there had to have been some doubt. There had, a little bit of doubt anyway. With me, I would have stood back and seen all these other plagues and thought, no, I mean, this is going to happen, but this is a strange way to be able to keep our people from not dying. It's strange. So now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, "This month shall be your beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, on the 10th of this month, every man shall take for himself a lamb according to the house of his father, a lamb for a household. And if the household is too small for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next to his house take it according to the number of the persons, according to each man's need. You shall make your count for the lamb." So even if it was just a husband or wife or whatever, if you didn't have a lamb, you had to get somewhere that there was a Passover lamb sacrificed. You had to be part of that. That there was no way around this except death. So as far as you look at that, verse 5, it says, "Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You shall take it from the sheep or from the goats. Now you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month, and then the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it at twilight." So stop right there at verse 6. So on the 10th, so basically we're looking at this from, just so it's easier for us to keep up with. It's not in January for us. It's actually, does anybody know when Passover is? March or April. Yeah. So this was the beginning of their Jewish, but for us, just because we understand January through December. So January 1, and then, we're looking for this to happen, and then on the 10th, you start to locate your lamb, and you start to watch this lamb, and you need to be able to notice something about this lamb. Who picked up on what's special about the lamb that they're going to sacrifice? Meaning no defects. Meaning, yeah, perfect. Yeah. It has to be your best. Had to be your best. Yeah. Male. So on the 10th, you're starting to look for this. You're starting to look for this lamb. And on what day was it sacrificed? On the 14th. Now it said, verse 6. Now you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. Then the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it at twilight. Now this is not just one lamb. Remember, it's one lamb per household. And this is being done. So, but all of Israel is doing this at the same time. And twilight is it's really a word that's used for between the days. Their Jewish days are from sunset to sunset instead of like we would do midnight to midnight. That's kind of how we look at that. But their days are different. Twilight would have been somewhere around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which is, oddly enough, the same time that Jesus was sacrificed. That was when the Lamb of God was killed. It's when he gave his life. On what day? Same day. Same day. Huh? Yeah, same day. So there are a lot of parallels here, okay? The blood here signifies what? He did, but what's the blood here signify? Well, we're about to. I'm jumping ahead of it. Let me go ahead and read. Y'all probably already know this, but let me go ahead and read. Verse 7. And they shall take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts and on the lintel of the houses where they eat it. And then they shall eat the flesh on that night, roasted in the fire with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs, they shall eat it. So not only the sacrifice, I guess for years I thought we just burnt the sacrifice up. You know, I don't know. I didn't study too deep in the Bible, I guess, but I just thought we just burnt the sacrifice completely up and pulled the bones off or whatever and did something, you know. But they were to sacrifice, and they were to cook the sacrifice, and they were to eat the sacrifice. And not only that, it says that they were to eat unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. So we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes too. Verse 9 says, do not eat it raw, nor boiled at all with water, but roasted in fire, its head with its legs and its entrails. How about that? For a little bit odd, but it was a whole sacrifice. You see where this is going. It is a whole sacrifice. It's not a sacrifice in part. It's a whole sacrifice. Verse 10, you shall let none of it remain until morning, and what remains of it until morning you shall burn with fire, and thus you shall eat it with a belt on your waist, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. So you shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. It's interesting to me, and I've been trying to read some stuff on this, and there are parallels here with the with sacrifice of Jesus, in that not only is the blood that we have and that Jesus shed on the cross, or shed everywhere, especially on the cross, but in his death, it didn't just end there. That we are to take of, and the symbolic part of this is we are to continue to consume. We're to continue to, and through prayer, through Bible study, and that's what that symbolizing means is to be able to do. And there was something else. They were to kick back and go on to bed and get in their pajamas and take it easy that night, right? They were not supposed to do that, meaning that's signifying and symbolizing something else too. We need to be ready to go. As Christians, we need to be ready to go. We need to be nourished. We need to be so all this is kind of paralleling, or if that's a word here, but it is the Lord's Passover. Verse 12 says, "For I will pass through the land of Egypt on that night, and will strike all the firstborn of the land of Egypt, both man and beast." So not only is it humans, but it's man and beast, every living creature. It says that, and against all of the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. Now the blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are. What if they were somewhere else? What if they were somewhere else? You don't need to stay at work. This is a special night. This is a special day, a special night. And they were to take this seriously. And it says that the blood on the door is a sign. It says, and when I see the blood, I will pass over. I will pass over you. And the plague shall not be on you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. And the parallel there is just like it sounds. When God looks at me, he sees the blood of Christ. And his wrath does not come upon me. God's wrath does not come upon you if you're a believer. You will never have to deal with the wrath of God, because if you're saved, you are under the blood of Jesus Christ. And when he looks at us, he passes over. And that's what's going on right here. In verse 14, so this day shall be to you a memorial, and you shall keep it as a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. You shall keep it as a feast by an everlasting ordinance. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall remove leaven from your houses. For whoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the seventh, that person shall be cut off from Israel. That's pretty serious, isn't it? So leaven, just about all the way through the Bible, I wouldn't say every passage in the Bible it speaks of leaven being sin, but most of the time when leaven is mentioned in the Bible, it's speaking of sin. So what's symbolizing is that it needs to be a holy, sanctified, pure 7 days. And it says, on the first day there shall be a holy convocation, and on the seventh day there shall be a holy convocation for you. No matter of work shall be done on them. So through that time, no work, but that everyone must eat only that only may be prepared by you. So you shall observe the feast of the unleavened bread, for on this day I will have brought your enemies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall observe this day throughout your generations as an everlasting ordinance. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. So we're doing this for 7 days. For 7 days, no leaven shall be found in your houses, since whoever eats what is leavened, that same person shall be cut off the congregation of Israel, whether he is a stranger or a native to the land or of the land. You shall eat nothing leavened in all your dwellings. You shall eat unleavened bread. So you think he's serious about the unleavened bread thing, right? How many times was that mentioned? Anytime that something is mentioned that many times in that short, somebody want to go back and count how many times unleavened is mentioned in those 5 or 6 verses. It's every other word. So it's a big deal. Verse 21, then Moses called for all the elders of Israel and said to them, take lambs for yourself according to your families and kill the Passover lamb. So now we know what we're supposed to do. We have the plan, we have the organization, and we know how we're supposed to do this. And Moses says, today's the day. Let's do it. Pick out the lambs for yourselves according to your families and kill the Passover lamb. And you shall take a bunch of hyssop, dip it in the blood, that is the basin, and strike the lintel with 2 doorposts with the blood that is in the basin. And none of you shall go out the door of his house until morning. For the Lord will pass through to strike the Egyptians, and when he sees the blood on the lintel and the 2 doorposts, the Lord will pass over the door and not allow the destructor to come into your houses to strike you. And you shall observe this thing as an ordinance for you and your sons forever. This is something that they're going to celebrate forever. It will come to pass when you come to the land which the Lord will give you, just as he promised, that you shall keep this service. And it shall be when your children say to you, what do you mean by this service? You see, there's going to be generations to come that's not aware and wasn't able to take part of this. But who's supposed to teach the children? the parents, the grandparents. So you, who teaches? Who teaches our children? You do. The parents, the grandparents, anybody who's volunteered to teach. These are the ones to teach. The same way then. Verse 26 says, and it shall be when your children say to you, what do you mean by this service? That you shall say, it is the Passover sacrifice of the Lord who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt when he struck the Egyptians and delivered our households. So the people bowed their heads and worshiped. Then the children of Israel went away and did so, just as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron, so they did. They've been in Egypt for hundreds of years. And they've been hearing from Moses for months and months that they're going to be released. They're going to go. They go to bed tonight knowing tomorrow's the day. This Passover triggers the beginning of us being brought out of the land of Egypt. How excited are you that night? I don't know that I could sleep. Honestly can't. They're ready. Yeah. I mean, maybe lean up against the wall somewhere. But sure, on the inside of the door, for sure that. But ready to go. Where are they going? Out of Egypt. That's all. I mean, eventually they know maybe they're going to Canaan. But what would that mess with anybody here tonight? We have a plan, but we really don't have a plan. I mean, that's what I'm thinking. I know it would mess her up. She would need to know what's going. Well, where we're going. I would too. I would think. Well, but we're leaving. We're leaving, and what James said, we're leaving Egypt, and that is a symbol of what? Of the children of Israel leaving Egypt. It's being released and getting their freedom. That's the freedom that we have through salvation. That's what that symbolizes. All the way through this story, you see symbolization through this and through salvation, and being freed from this. Does anybody remember the day that they were saved? Does anybody remember that? I mean, it was a long time. I was 6, but I still remember the day that I was saved. And I remember thinking, just knowing somehow or another, my life is different. It's just different now. How many saved when they were in their later, 20s, 30s, maybe, I don't know. Who was saved as a kid? Raise your hand if you were saved as a kid. Any of you that was saved later in life, like 20 plus? Yeah, okay. What'd y'all think? You get saved, Ricky. What'd you think?
Well, I'll never forget it because it was on Christmas, right before Christmas. We were singing Christmas songs, and there was 2 people that sang. I won't forget their names. It was a mother and daughter.
Yeah.
And that, for some reason, that song struck my heart.
Yeah.
And those 2 people, a lot of people here probably know it. I don't know whether I should get names out or what.
It won't.
When that call came, that feeling was there.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I wasn't talking with that day.
Really? That's great. That's a good Christmas service right there. So you lay down that night to go to sleep, and you're thinking in your mind, whether you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, or however old you are, or whether you're a child, you're in, or a teenager. You lay down at night, and that's what's on your mind, is tonight is the first night of the rest of my life. my life has been changed. Tomorrow morning, it's going to be completely different than what it was this morning. And that's what they were thinking. They were thinking, I'm laying, this is going to be the strangest thing, because this has always been my life. I've been a slave my whole life. And tomorrow, I will not be a slave anymore. That makes you, that'll get you excited. It does me. I'm not a slave anymore. And that's what they're thinking. They're thinking this in let's look at verse 43. It says, and the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, this is the ordinance of the Passover. No, well, we read that. Did we? No. Oh yeah. I'm on a different page. You're right. Verse 29. And it came to pass at midnight that the Lord struck all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on his throne to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and the firstborn of the livestock. So Pharaoh rose in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt. Well, there was more than one, but that is signifying that there was mourning in Egypt. For there was not a house where there was not one dead. Verse 31, then he called for Moses, and this is talking about Pharaoh here. Then he called for Moses and Aaron by night and said, rise, go out from among my people, both you and the children of Israel, and go serve the Lord as you have said. Also, take your flocks and your herds, and you have said, and be gone. And bless me also. And that's something. Talking about somebody throwing in a white towel. I mean, Pharaoh finally decided to surrender. And the Egyptians urged the people that they might send them out of the land in haste. Listen, Egypt is decimated. I mean, it is. You remember all the other plagues, and then this. I mean, the country's in shambles. They sent them out of the land in haste, for they said, we shall all be dead. So the people took their dough before it was leavened, having their kneading bowls bound up in their clothes and on their shoulders. Now the children of Israel had done according to the word of Moses, and they had asked from the Egyptians articles of silver, articles of gold, and clothing, and the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so they granted them what they requested. Thus they plundered the Egyptians. Egypt, there's nothing left of Egypt. The only thing that they had was their household possessions, and they wind up giving those away to the Israelites before they left. That's a God thing. I'm telling you, that is a God thing for something like that to happen. So, verse 37 says, then the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses, which is in Egypt, to Suketh, about 600,000 men on foot besides children. So you had 600,000 men, you roughly women, children, and everybody. You're looking at a couple of million people. A lot of people in a moving caravan. I can't even imagine. Can't even imagine doing something like that. A mixed multitude went up with them also, and flocks and herds, a great deal of livestock, and they baked unleavened cakes out of dough which they had brought out of Egypt. For it was not leavened, because they were driven out of Egypt and could not wait. For they prepared provisions for themselves. Now the sojourn of the children of Israel who lived in Egypt was 430 years. And it came pass at the end of the 430 years, on that very same day, it came to pass that all the armies of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. And it is a night of solemn observance to the Lord for bringing them out of the land of Egypt. Can you imagine just sitting there? I mean, campfire, not campfire, but a fire, and everybody sitting around that fire talking about what we're going to do tomorrow. What's going on tomorrow? That's what I would be thinking. What's my role? We're just getting out of here, and we're traveling. We're going to do the same thing tomorrow we did today, and we're going to follow God's direction all the way through this, or at least we need to. And so, verse 43. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "This is the ordinance of the Passover. No foreigner shall eat it, but every man's servant who is bought for money, when you have circumcised him, then he shall eat it. And a sojourner and hired servant shall not eat it. In one house it shall be eaten. You shall not carry any of the flesh outside the house, nor shall you break one of its bones." That has to do as well with Jesus' sacrifice. If you remember, this is a symbolization too of Jesus, because when he was sacrificed and he was put on the cross, you remember what happened to the bones, and this is mentioned in Isaiah too. But you remember what happened to the bones of the two thieves that were sacrificed, or that were killed with Jesus. You remember what they did to their legs? They broke their legs. But with Jesus, they came to Jesus. They didn't break his legs. So the sacrifice, that's what that's referring to there. Verse 47, all the congregation of Israel shall keep it. And when a stranger dwells with you and wants to keep the Passover to the Lord, let all his males be circumcised, and then let him come near and keep it. And see, this is not only for Israel. Others were allowed, but you had to be circumcised. As far as the male, you had to be, or you were not part of this. So slave servants or servants, and of course it says sojourners, people who are just joining in, that wants to be part and convert, they have to be circumcised. Verse 49 says, "One law shall be for the native born and for the stranger who dwells among you." Same thing. Thus all the children of Israel did as the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron, so they did. And it came to pass on that very same day that the Lord brought the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt according to their armies. So we'll stop right there. Verse 13, or chapter 13, we'll pick up in chapter 13 next week. So there's this one chapter 13. It's kind of sandwiched in between this and the Red Sea crossing, which is going to be the following week. But man, these people are seeing God do something right before their eyes. They really have, haven't they? Yeah. Of all the things that you would think they didn't hesitate, but I imagine there were probably some that was like, I don't know. This is strange. Like I said, this is strange to put blood on my doors. But they saw God do some amazing things. So, the story that you think you would read from here on out is they go straight out of Egypt, right in the land of Canaan, and conquer. Because they trust God that much. Right? But what happens? 40 years. 40 years happens. They're running around out there, battling, trying to do things on their own, and then finally, after 40 years, they cross over into Canaan. Any questions or comments?
I have one question.
Okay.
In 2023, says when the Lord goes will see the lamb strike down the hips, and he will see the blood on the top and sides of the door frame and will pass over that doorway. He will not permit the destroyer to enter your houses or strike you down. And then 24 says, obey these instructions as lasting ordinance for you and your descendant. When you enter the land, the Lord will give you as he promised to observe this ceremony. Did they continue to make
To put blood on the doorpost?
Every door frame and all that?
I don't know. It's a good question. Does anybody know that? I don't think I remember that ever happening again. I know they do the Passover, but there was not death that would come. But they did the Passover.
I mean, they had tents and stuff, you know, their camp. They camped.
It's a good question. Dig into that and find out and let me know. That's a good question. Never had anybody ask that.
Yeah, that would be like 40 years that they didn't.
Yeah.
Well, they had a temporary temple
They
and
didn't
camp
have
and
a
all that.
door, a regular door.
Oh, I mean, they were doubting so many things out there in the desert. I don't know if they would have carried through that.
Well-
Jewish people still celebrate the
Mhm.
Passover with the unleavened bread, but they don't do blood on, like literal lamb's blood on the door.
Not that I know of.
So if they did do it for a while, they've stopped now. I mean, they don't do it now.
Not that I know
I
of.
know a few Jewish people, they celebrate the Passover, but they don't kill a lamb and put it on their door or anything symbolic of that I'm aware of.
Me either.
So when Jesus died, did it not do away with all the sacrifices?
I'm going for that.
For-
I'm that.
Well,
Until then,
for the believer, yes, but
You didn't have to do the sacrifices like they did in the past.
for the believer, yes, there were you still celebrated, and that's I don't have a problem with somebody celebrating Passover, but it's there were two sacrifices and feasts that changed as far as that goes, is the Day of Atonement and Passover. But both of those have everything to do with our sin being forgiven because of Jesus being a sacrifice. So to answer your question, yes, but not for the Jewish people, because they don't believe that Jesus was God. They don't believe, I guess they believe that he was put on a cross and killed, but he wasn't the sacrifice that we believe that he is. Yeah. So they look at this completely different than the way we do.
one more comment on from my side, that the blood, when Jesus was doing the Last Supper, approaching the Passover, he said, take this and eat, it's my body,
Mm-hmm.
and the bread, and take this and eat and drink, it's my blood. That eating that Passover lamb, whole, all of it,
Mm-hmm.
Don't eat the blood, but I don't know. I mean, I see the parallel there also, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what I'm trying to ask. I guess maybe I saw the parallel.
Yeah, there are tons of symbolizations, I guess, in this chapter, and Jesus, more so than what I brought out, I'm sure.
Told his disciples that they had to eat his body and drink his blood. They all kind of
Yeah, all of them, but about 12. They were.
They didn't get that. So
Yeah. Yeah, that was right. All right, anything else? Well, let's stand. We'll be dismissed. Thank you for being here.